episode is brought to you by Wreckhouse Press. For all of your printing needs, it's 709-695-2389. That's Wreckhouse Press.
Hello, hockey fans. It's Monday, March 21st, the official NHL Trade Deadline day. It's 3:32 p.m. and we're starting this recording. The trade deadline has just passed, and we know what's happened in the hockey world, what teams have done what to shape up their rosters for the rest of the season. Lots of activity going down. Of course, much of that activity unfolded before we even got to the trade deadline day. A lot of big deals that have happened in the weeks leading up. Tampa Bay had already loaded up with guys like Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel. The Florida Panthers followed suit. They had already claimed guys like Ben Sherratt, and of course they got the big fish in Claude Giroux. The Bruins had managed to deal for Hampus Lindholm and had already re-signed him before we even got to trade deadline day, and lots of other deals that unfolded in the past few weeks. But that said, we did have a very busy trade deadline day, and one of the biggest teams, the most active teams today, were the Montreal Canadiens. Verified sellers since, I don't know, the second week of the season or something. They've been verified sellers forever. And they got down to business today. We're going to be doing a series of fan reaction interviews in this podcast for Wreckhouse Press, and you'll get to listen to fans from different areas react. I'm joined right now by Derek Ford, who is a native of Port aux Basques and is very familiar with the Wreckhouse area, currently living in Grand Falls. Thanks for joining me, Derek.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you. Derek is a Habs fan. He actually has a Facebook fan discussion page called he says the very originally named Montreal Canadiens fan discussion. You can find that on Facebook. But just, I guess before we get into any details, Derek, what's your first off-the-cuff reaction to what the Habs have done today?
I think that they've laid a very solid foundation going forward. The picks and the prospects mostly are all of a similar nature. They're safe bets, except for Justin Barron, who I think is going to turn into a slam dunk. When you couple that with what's likely to be a top 3 pick in the draft, you're talking about a really accelerated turnaround, which seems to be a bit of a Gorton specialty.
It does. That's certainly, it was 2018 that the New York Rangers looked to be in trouble, and today they were buyers. So 4 years later, they're buyers at the deadline and have a young crew that are just going to get better. They're not in the Tampa Bay category yet, but that's a young crew that's just going to get better, while some of those other players on Tampa are starting to age and so on. But yes, you're right that we're seeing a similar sort of deal there. Justin Barron, probably the biggest acquisition of the day, I guess. Arturi Lehkonen, that left Montreal, fan favorite, hard worker. What's your reaction to losing Lex?
Oh, it's heartbreaking to lose him. You're talking about a player who does everything right, and a player I've argued has stronger offensive abilities than a lot of people have given him credit for. His first season, he punched out 18 goals and then was used defensively in third line positions by defensive-minded coaches. You turn him loose under Martin St. Louis, and he's starting to flirt with 20. So to me, that's one of the most painful players we could lose, because he is young, he does everything right, he's got that offensive potential. But to get a right-hand shot D-man who could quarterback a power play in the future, top 4 potential, those are really rare in the NHL. You have to draft them or you have to pay a king's ransom. And I think that this is about the only sort of deal for Lehkonen that could make me walk away not heartbroken.
That's well put. Lots of fans, I think, are still feeling it, and the Habs, of course, went into this deadline with 2 big holes. There's still a hole at center ice for a top guy that can fall in behind Nick Suzuki, and a big hole on right-hand D with Weber gone. With Petrie certainly looking like he will be gone. That was a deal. We'll speak about that in a minute. That was a deal we wondered if it would happen today, but it looks like that's going to be an off-season trade at this point. But they don't have any strong D prospects on the right side. They have Logan Mailloux, who has, some stuff attached to him, who looks like he's developing for the right side. But following this deadline, they suddenly have another top four guy in Justin Barron. So a good piece of work there. As sad as it is to see Lehkonen go, a good piece of work there. Very impressed with the trade for Kulak. I mean, who expected that Kulak was going to bring in a second round pick and bring another defenseman back?
Yeah, I think Lagesson is probably destined for Laval right now, unless injuries become an issue. But that's fine, because you need a winning team in Laval to help the prospects that are moving up to develop properly. A second round pick for him is fantastic value in its own right. I mean, in deadlines past, that would have been a third or a fourth. But it does speak to the fact that Kulak is perhaps the most underrated defenseman that's been on the Habs roster in the last couple of years. And certainly, I think there are fans and perhaps some former coaches in management that didn't give him the trust that he needed. And we've seen what's happened this year. He has improved consistently. He and Romanoff have made an excellent pairing. And I think he's going to be missed as well, but it's excellent value for what he brings.
Absolutely. Nice work there in Edmonton to get Kulak. Were there some other guys that you were expecting to see leave Montreal today that you're disappointed are still on the roster?
There's a couple people I thought were real possibilities. We had heard there were some calls about Armia. That would have been a pipe dream, because I don't think Armia's contract lends itself to a trade. I had kind of hoped that maybe someone like Mike Hoffman would have been on the move. If there's a team out there that's seen the way he's improved defensively as of late and remembers his scoring skills, that could have fetched a healthy return. But the simple fact of the matter is, so many of the contenders are right up to the edge of the cap or using long-term injured reserve money to stay afloat, that those big value contracts are going to end up waiting. And I think it's fair, too, that we give Marty St. Louis and the new management team time to decide exactly who and what they're dealing with. There's a couple players, Dvorak and Drouin, that I'm really excited to see what becomes of them under the new regime and see what can be dragged out of them. And now having a couple of games of pressure-free hockey, which is basically what we have now for the Habs for the end of the season, is going to be an interesting evaluation period.
It does give them a nice evaluation period. Dvorak, certainly, when he came in, I was a little bit surprised to see his name in the rumors. When he came in, I thought, based on what he gave in Arizona, I thought that he was going to show up a little bit differently for the Habs this season. Mm-hmm. But the same can be said for a solid, 21 guys that didn't quite show up the way we want them to this season. And you made a really good point about Lehkonen that I think is going to be really interesting when it comes to guys like Drouin and Dvorak, that, he started out so strong, and then the emphasis with under Julien and again under Ducharme really was so strongly a defensive approach that, that Dvorak was never going to come in and be as good as Danault defensively. I think what he does have potential to be is better than Danault offensively, but in the structure that he was in previously, maybe not. But as you said, these guys now get a chance to prove themselves a little bit under the new coach, who's getting, I guess, less new by the day, and under the interim coach, I should say, with a decision to come in the summer. But then we'd be on to the next big event in the summer, which would be the draft. Any things that you saw unfold today that you think might be a story for the draft floor for the Habs?
Yeah, and I think when I tried to make this point when you and I were messaging, the consensus is if you can get 2 or 3 good NHL players out of a draft, you have a success. Going into this draft, we have 2 or 3 good players from the prospects we've acquired over the last couple of weeks.
Right.
Add to that a top 3 pick that will, touch wood, likely end up filling the hole in our center line, second line center. What you've given Gorton and Hughes is an incredible amount of freedom. They've got the bare minimum they need to keep the organization moving. So rather than play it safe, they have the freedom to swing for the fences with the remaining draft picks after our top 3 pick. Gordon is infamous for moving up in the draft when he sees somebody he wants. We can afford to take that kind of chance now, which is something that previous management, I don't think, ever did, to get the players that we need. And if it involves a bit of a gamble, quality over quantity, we can do it because we've already gotten what we need out of this draft. And we're likely going to have 2 of the biggest holes in the organization filled by the end of the first round, which is a top 4 right-hand defenseman to replace Petrie and a top 6 center. And yeah, okay, maybe it's a bit of much to say a top 6 center is going to come from the draft floor right into the NHL. But that's another reason why I think they keep someone like Dvorak around as a safety blanket to fill in on that guy's wing. You know, it's just an incredible amount of freedom to go for the players they really want without worrying about the consequences of a miss in the draft.
Sounds like it's a really fun time to be a Habs fan. Certainly from our end. You know, if you're a Habs fan right now, you've had a long time of, you know, it was only last year we were looking at playoffs very differently. But really over the last decade, the team has been more off than on. And so the opportunity to reshape this roster a little bit is certainly a very welcome thing for Habs fans. Derek, thanks for joining me. Good to hear your reactions. Enjoy the rest of the hockey season.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
So I'm joined now by Lee Hodder from Stoneville, Newfoundland. Stoneville's on the road to the Isles, if that helps you even a tiny bit. Just a small town in the Gander Bay area. But Lee has been living in Calgary for probably longer than he lived in Stoneville at this stage of his life.
Getting close, yeah. I moved here in 99, so we're at 23 years this summer, and I think it was 23 when I moved. So
there you go.
The summer is 50-50. So
So Lee, you're out there in Alberta. I know you're a Habs fan, but there's you know a fair amount about what's happening with the teams out there in the Habs, and the Alberta teams have had some interactions over the last little while. I want to start a little bit actually going back before the trade deadline with the Flames picking up Toffoli, getting out ahead of the game really early. And of course, Toffoli was a fan favorite in Montreal, but you know what's the early review on Toffoli out in Calgary?
Well, I think he's basically already a star here in most people's eyes. I mean, Calgary is already obviously familiar with him, with Vancouver having him for a year and seeing him there, even if they didn't know him from LA, you know, and that. So it's immediate, I think, hit with the Flames fans and obviously with the team as well. So
he's off to a flying start there, as already produced that secondary scoring they were looking for. And you know, I know that back during that trade there was some rumor that Ben Sherratt might be included in that deal. It didn't happen. You know, I know there's still some trades that haven't yet been called in the deadline, but still some 33 in the queue or something last I checked. But I don't believe Calgary did manage to land themselves a D-man today. Would there be concern in Calgary about the lack of an addition there?
I don't think so. From what I've been talking to some folks down here, you know, they didn't want Geo back as an example. That ship is, you know, sailed there. And if you look at, you know, the Flames organization, you got the Stockton Heat is basically the top team points percentage wise in the AHL, right? And they got some team guys on that obviously could step up if need to be called upon. So there's also the chemistry of the team. I know there's no changes on D per se, but you've already added Toffoli. You've already added, I forget the other guy's name, but he was a fourth line center, whatever they added there, third line center.
Right? Callie Yarncroke, I think that's what his name is.
One. And he added now Carpenter at the last second we were here, so that's their fourth line center. So it's a lot in a chemistry team like that when they're doing so well anyway, right? And plus, they got one of the best goalies in the league there, so the defense can probably take a little, less, as we all know in Montreal, a little less
yes.
punch there to hopefully have something more up front. So
I find Calgary to be a sort of that sneaky team that, everyone in the West, they're talking about Colorado probably as being the big team to come out, and they probably are. We'll get to them. They've made some moves as well, but yeah, the Flames for me are a sort of a bit of a sleeper. I think they have potential to do some serious damage when playoff time comes around.
I agree. I mean, you look at the last couple of games between Colorado and Calgary; they've been absolutely, amazing games to watch. Definitely playoff atmosphere games, and that. So it'll be an amazing series. It end up being the Western Final, let's say. So
could well be, yeah.
They've got the pieces there, and of course, you never count out, a Sutter coach team going into the playoffs, right? So that's a big factor right there.
The Sutter experience, and when he's got a team buying in, everyone talks about the shelf life for Sutter, and that might be true. There might be a shelf life for sure, but when he's got his team rowing with him, that can be a dangerous combination in any playoff.
Absolutely. So
then, of course.
The pieces are there regarding, again, goaltending, scoring, defense seems to be well. So the pieces are there for sure. For sure.
Then, of course, you got the Edmonton Oilers. And, it was, I wondered if we would be having a conversation this afternoon about you getting on the go with some emergency response people to go check, see if Ken Holland was still alive. But he did got resuscitated at some point there this afternoon and managed to pull off a little bit at the end.
He did a little there.
He did a little work. Well, first of all, I guess he managed to be the team that won the Evander Kane sweepstakes. How are fans liking Kane in Alberta?
Well, I think Oilers are excited enough for him. I'm happy to get them on that. Reading comments on Twitter, not even today, they're talking about, is there any forward traded today that would have been as good as Kane? Arguably not, right? At least potential-wise, what he can do there, and then they are on a winning streak now. I think 3-0 right now, 3-game winning streak. So if the goaltending happens to hold at all, of course, that's been a big question mark. They could stay in the playoff hunt, and who knows, win a round or two. And of course, obviously Oilers fans are hoping for more, but they got a couple pieces today. Kulak being one, so I think it will be a decent hand for them for getting the puck up to those superstars and that. So who knows?
Kulak, I thought, was a smart ad. I said before the day got underway that I expected that a smart GM would be, or a couple of smart GMs would be making a deal for Lehkonen and Kulak, would understand their worth and for the price that'd be available for. I'm a little bit surprised that it's Ken Holland who ended up being that smart GM, but maybe give the Oiler fans a little bit of a sense of what they can expect from Kulak.
Again, he's definitely going to be your 6-7 defenseman, or 5-6-7 defenseman. A lot of people rave about his skating ability. He is a tremendous skater, a good puck handler, and that there. But he has to be put obviously in the right role. He's not going to be a 1-2-3, maybe step up into a 4 spot. But that's the extent, I think, of his ability. Manage his minutes, and you know what? I think even as we saw last year, play a couple games, give him a game off sort of thing, and it could be beneficial there as well.
He's got some playoff experience, and that's not the worst thing for Edmonton to be adding right now. And they've added Broussard as well this afternoon. I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't land a goalie in there at some point. Bit of a shocker that they didn't see a need to fill that hole. But at some point, we got to stop being surprised that the Oilers aren't getting a goalie.
Well, and again, they still got Smiths on the payroll for next year as well, right? Yeah. So it's pretty much impossible to move him out. Koskinen is a UFA this summer, so are they going to do like Leafs done with Freddie and just walk away from him in summer and hope to get something else? Who knows what they're planning on doing there. If between now and September they extend Koskinen and still got Smith on the payroll, there's going to be lots of questions regarding that. So, but again, what's out there right now. So, It's the other question that's of a proven goalie. You know, a lot of people bring up Georgiev in New York and had a phenomenal game last night or 2 nights ago, but is he ready for actual number one role? Who knows?
That's right? The issue, right? Number one's not a lot of number ones available. I thought that Fleury would be the perfect addition for Edmonton, but of course he got taken up in Minnesota, which was a bit of a shocker. But some teams out west, I mean, Calgary and Edmonton going to be in tight against teams like the Avalanche. You've added Cogliano there, and added Josh Manson on the D last week, and then of course they added Lehkonen. And I asked Jared Book on the podcast a couple of weeks ago who he thought would win the trade deadline. He said whatever team trades for Arturi Lehkonen, and of course that would be the Avalanche, we know today. But the Wild did some good things as well, so it's going to be a tough Western Conference for both Edmonton and Calgary, but both keeping busy. We've mentioned some of the Habs deals. What was your favorite deal for the Habs today?
Oh, for sure, it was the Lehkonen deal. Sad to see him go, but to get Barron back as that right-handed shot defenseman, very interesting to learn. I mean, that him and Goulet were paired at the World Juniors, right? Top pairing that there. So for them to be together is great. Again, reading some of the reviews and stuff on Twitter, it was tough, obviously, for Avalanche to let him go. Even Sakic said that he would not have let him go unless was a player coming back that they had control over or term. So it's I think that's a big win for Montreal there. And to get the second round pick with it, it was in 2024, but that's still a pick that can obviously they can even float this summer for something else or whatever they want to do right at the draft. So I think that's a pretty good get.
Yeah, there's some debate actually about that second because the Oilers' current second is sorry, not the Oilers' current second. Someone's current. No, that's actually in the Kulak deal. Sorry. Yeah, I'm confused with the Kulak deal. Yeah.
And I was going to mention that the Oilers' current second, they said was for 2023, but it's not. It's actually the 2022 conditional, but it's already tied up in the conditional on the Keith trade with Chicago.
That's right. Yeah.
So if by chance, I don't know the full extent, but basically if Oilers were to miss the playoffs or I think even lose in the first round, Chicago does not get that pick. And that, so then it would be Montreal's. But if they actually go further in the playoffs, then that pick would go to Chicago, and then Montreal would get 23. So, if we have to cheer against Edmonton, it's just not a bad thing, especially for me in Calgary.
Yeah,
Montreal gets a better pick. So
a little rivalry there for sure. Yeah, it's that was a big deal for the Habs. Fans are hurting over losing Lehkonen, and to an extent hurting over losing Kulak. We were all sad about losing Toffoli back in February. It's a good thing, I guess, when you have players that you're sad to see to go. It means that they've done something for you along the way. Sherratt deal also, a big return on those deals, on all of those deals. The Hammond trade was the one that amused me. Kent Hughes said that he wanted to give the goalie an opportunity to continue playing in the NHL. So with Allen and Price, slowly getting back to health, Allen's already back. Wanted to give Hammond a chance to keep playing in the NHL. So that's a little bit of goodwill to spread about your name out there in public during this season as well.
Yeah.
Any expectations from today that anything you saw from the Habs or any other teams today that you think have some leftover pieces for with the draft coming up, things that might have been indicated today that maybe point to something else to come in the draft?
Well, I think we can all look at Petrie as Bobby being a big piece. That's probably going to go at the draft. I think that's the biggest one. Obviously, never got traded today. Still Weber's contract is up in the air, what they're going to do with that. And that there, I know that Arizona did take on the contract from Winnipeg there with Little, right?
Right.
So maybe Arizona's out of the Weber one now. I don't know. But that was been rumored, so that's still a play to happen there. And and again, there's some teams that to me are in the mix, obviously, of Stanley Cup. I mean, Leafs being a prime one there. If Leafs don't make it to the first round this year, and there's, the Atlantic is probably one of the toughest divisions this year, right? So you look at what Boston done alone. Like, I would not sleep on Boston at all. With heading Lindholm and some other pieces that they done today, they are ripe to me to upset a team like a Tampa or a Florida. That would not shock me, right? So
you could never count that team out.
No. So again, it'll be interesting what becomes of the playoffs and what happens. Some teams with higher expectations and see what happens with those. But for Montreal, I think it's definitely the P3. And see what they're going to do with some other contracts. I mean, Montreal still tops in the league in contracts right now, so they need to do something with Armia, possibly Hoffman. What they're going to do with Paul Byron and those guys, right, to bring down that payroll.
They're going to need to do some work on the payroll for sure. There's a couple of other deals that I was kind of waiting to see today. I mean, we kind of knew that Chychrun was going to get put off. But it looked earlier today that Boston was going to move DeBrusk. Had extended him, and the rumor was that it was with a view to moving him out for his trade request wasn't rescinded, so the view was that maybe the extension was to make it easier to move him. But deadline came and went without that, or we assume, since we are still waiting on some final moves. But I imagine a DeBrusk deal wouldn't be kept secret very well. Lots of stuff happening, still lots of news to follow from here. Playoffs, and then off to the draft in Montreal in July. Exciting time in hockey. Thanks for joining me, Lee, and we'll chat again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we've already discussed the teams out west and the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm joined now with a fella who can tell us a little bit about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm joined by James Murphy from Bay Roberts, Newfoundland. James is a big Leafs fan and has lots of thoughts, I'm sure, about what went down over the last 2 days. James, what do you think of of what the Leafs were able to accomplish at the deadline?
In the hard cap world, I think Dubas did probably as best as he was going to do with the players that were available. Giordano was definitely a big win for him defensively, something that they've been kind of struggling with on and off all year. So seeing him come on board and rejoin his old pal there, Brody, we'll see how they pan out together.
For sure, they've been struggling a bit with some injuries. The Leafs, finding out, of course, that Sandin is going to be out for a bit, and they needed to add a D before their injuries, and then Muzzin went down. Now Sandin, so they were in desperate need to add the bodies. They did. Starting with,
it's been a problem for the Leafs for the last few years is clearing bodies out of the front of that net. Goaltending can only take you so far, and we're struggling in that department this year too.
we're gonna get to the goaltending for sure, because there was a little drama around that in the last few days. But what's the fan reaction on Labushkin, for starters? How is he fitting in?
Everybody that I've been interacting with is pretty impressed with his play so far. He seems to be a stay-at-home defenseman, not afraid to take the body, and seems to be gelling pretty well with Riley there in that pairing. So that kind of frees up somebody else now to alternate out, because they kind of had him tied with Brody there for the majority of the year, and having that flexibility and having a good defensive-minded defenseman, as opposed to we've had our share of offensive-minded defensemen that have trouble staying at home, but it's a good balance for Riley. It allows him to jump up to the play, knowing that he's got a good D-man there to cover him.
For sure. Giordano, of course, it feels like that was the direction that Dubas wanted to go in for whole deadline, really. Like, there were other names that were being discussed, but it always felt like Giordano was where he was going to land, and that's where he ended up. Is the expectation that he will play with Brody? Is that what folks are thinking?
That seems to be the consensus as of now. But God knows, we've got 19 games left going down the road here. Anything at all could happen. So we'll see how it goes. But seems like that seems to be consensus of where he's going to land, is paired up with Brody again.
Right. You mentioned the goaltending situation. Of course, Mrazek cleared waivers. Certainly hasn't been what Dubas was hoping for when he signed him. And now you have Jack Campbell is also out with an injury that is not quite clear what his health situation is going to be. Dubas tried to be a little creative with picking up the European goaltender, or trying to sign the European goaltender, but Arizona snuck in there and claimed him on.
Snapped him up. Dubas not having much luck with the waiver situation. Seems like every time he's got a player up on waivers, he's snapped up by somebody.
In his presser, he said they've had 11 waiver claims this year, which is he says more than twice of any other team in the league. So that's pretty bad luck. But what's the reaction to it being Arizona of all places? They've just signed their own goalie. They're not going to the playoffs. Does it feel a little bit like a bit of a screw over from a Leafs perspective?
Yeah, kind of sort of does. Yeah, but it's all fair in hockey. Once you're on waivers, you're fair game for anybody. But yeah, we'll see. Like I said, he wasn't really a goaltender that had established himself at an NHL level. Regardless, I think he was more of a backup plan to a backup plan if we didn't land a goalie. So it is what it is.
Are you surprised the Leafs didn't try to pick up another goalie?
Personally, I think Fleury was really the only one that was at the forefront, and that didn't happen. But I didn't catch the drama between the two Kyles. I seen some stuff floating around on Twitter there about the conversations that they had being leaked, but I hadn't really caught up to it as of yet, just getting home from work. So
I did see some reference as well, and there was a question that Dubas was asked in his presser about it, and he said, "You're going to have to ask Davidson." So I think there was a leak around Fleury's willingness to come to Toronto or something of that sort. So. But there were a couple of other options, but not great options, not an obvious place to go.
Varlamov was another name that was floating out there, but he's kind of had a hit and miss season as well. So we have what we have, and hoping that Jack's rib injury was what was kind of adding to his instability as of late, but we'll see how that all pans out. I'm hoping that he returns to his pre-All-Star form, and
for sure
we've got a solid goalie going down the stretch here. But nice to see the kid coming along and Shalliger there and turning a few heads. I don't expect that's a reality that's going to be maintained, but you never know. We've seen it before. You'll probably remember Steve Penny in the playoffs. He turned a few heads, came from nowhere, but we'll see.
There's been a kid or two along the way. I mean, Jordan Bennington wasn't exactly getting his old age pension when he won a cup, was he?
Yeah.
So you don't know. But it's a situation to be in when your starter is out with a health situation, not knowing what it looks like, and you've got a trade deadline. Did the Leafs do enough?
I can't really say for certain. I probably would have liked to see a little more grit at it at the bottom six level there, but this team has been kind of weird. Like the teams that they shouldn't be beating, or having a tough time with during the year. Those are the ones that they really seem to show up for, which is good in a way. But the the nonsense teams like Arizona and Buffalo and Detroit that they should have been handily beating. Those seem the ones that they seem to struggle with. It was good to see him this past week now in a game against Carolina. Probably, I would say, probably their strongest game I've seen them play all year as an overall game. And getting that mentality out of their heads of losing the lead and panicking. That seems to be the struggle that they've been having. And they've got 19 games to try and figure out if they've got the stamina to do it.
What's going to happen with Tavares and Nylander? Are they figuring it out?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Like those two games that they had there, Carolina, I forget who the game was we had before them, where Matthews was out, and Tavares looked really strong with Bunting and Marner there. He was like a man on a mission. Those two games, I was kind of expecting for Dubas Keefe to at least run that for another game or so to see if there was some kind of chemistry that you could reestablish there with Matthews and Nylander, put back together, and leave Tavares where he was for a while. But maybe they'll experiment down the stretch here and see if that's something that they can work with. Having Tavares being on his top of his game certainly adds a whole different dimension to the team for sure.
For sure. Well, I mean, the good thing about it, if you're a Leafs fan right now, on trade deadline day, you're either a buyer or a seller. I mean, I'm a Habs fan, and so I was pleased with the Habs selling today. But the beauty of being a buyer, whether you're happy with the buying or not, the beauty is that you've got a postseason to look forward to, and the Leafs will be a playoff team, and they will be in the running, and that's all you can ask for this time of year.
Yeah, and whoever they end up being matched up against in the first round, it's going to be a battle.
It's going to be a battle.
Whether it's Carolina, Boston, Tampa, or Florida, we're in for a battle.
There's no easy first round.
No,
that's for sure. Well, good luck with it. Hope you have a fun playoff season to watch. Certainly, I mean, be mixed feelings on this end with what the Leafs are doing or not, but wish you the very best and a lot of fun in the hockey that's left. Thanks for doing this. All right, take care. So for our final trade deadline day guest today, I have with me Corinne Hines, making sure I'm going to get her name pronounced appropriately. Corinne joins us. She's the Habs beat writer from Hockey Buzz. That's hockeybuzz.com. So you can find all of her work there. And of course, you can find her on Twitter as well. And thank you for joining me today, Corinne.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Good to have you here. We've been talking about the trade deadline with some Habs fans and Leafs fans, some folks out west, trying to get a sense of the reactions across the league to what's happened today in the trade deadline. Big day, much bigger than we expected. So. Give me a sense of what you thought were some of the biggest deals of the day.
Just from the Habs standpoint or overall?
Overall, Habs
overall,
and
I'm still going to go with the Lehkonen deal. Seriously, sure. That's how happy I am about this deal. Don't get me wrong, I love Lehkonen, but I'm so glad that we now have management that's not going to go out on trade deadline and get you Andreas Martinson, Dwight King, and whoever the third player was. I can't remember. But, you go out there. Yeah, you go out there and you get a prospect like Justin Barron on top of second round pick. That's just an amazing return. I mean, I've heard that's what the Avs were willing to offer for Claude Giroux.
Right.
That kind of tells you what they think of Lehkonen. And I know a lot of people love Lehkonen, but you gotta let him go at that price, especially considering how much money the Avs have tied up in bottom six players already with Armia and Byron, and those guys you're not going to be able to move, especially not Armia. So, they weren't going to be able to keep Lehkonen anyway. They couldn't pay him what he's going to ask. So it's win-win. Brilliant.
It's win-win. Yeah. Absolutely. Lehkonen, fans who think Lehkonen's re-signing for $3 million and change are going to get a big shock when the time comes for him to get his new deal. He's played himself into a nice contract, and as you said, Marc Bergevin left the Habs with a pretty big bill, if you would, a pretty big budget.
Yeah.
And some of the work of the new management is going to be about cleaning that up.
And you can tell from that deal as well the new identity that they want to give the team by going out and getting Justin Barron. I mean, the guy is a puck-moving defenseman. He's got smooth skating. It's all about, launching the attack, which is great. Right. But Bergevin was more about getting just, big punishing defensemen, whereas this new organization kind of wants to score goals instead of just preventing them. It's a breath of fresh air.
It is such a breath of fresh air. And when you, when you think, Brett Kulak moved out today as well, also for a nice return for the Habs. A defender that they picked up off waivers. No, actually, they didn't pick him up.
No, they
traded two AHL players for him.
Yeah, not much anyway. So.
Two guys.
And when you think about the fact that the Sabres were only able to get, I think, a 6th-round pick for Robert Hagg, and then we trade Kulak for a conditional second from 2022, which becomes 2023 second round if the Oilers reach the Cup final.
Right.
That's a big if, isn't it?
That's a giant if.
With that goaltending, it's not happening. So, yeah.
That's not a bad segue. Were you surprised the Oilers didn't do something for goaltending?
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, I was surprised that they didn't do something, and I was also surprised that Toronto didn't do anything. I mean,
sure.
If Kyle Dubas is seriously not concerned about his goaltending, he's the only guy on the planet. I mean, I'm sorry, but what is he doing? He's not made that many changes since that team was bounced by the Habs after being ahead 3-1.
Right.
So are these guys going to enter the playoffs in confidence? Wouldn't think so when both of your goalies have been struggling, and then you just go in there and you're like, okay, we can do this year, guys. It's going to be different. Why would it be?
What's different? Yeah. They were up against the cap, but the time to look at some of that would have been off season, and they seem to be relying on those big four up front, and everything else is.
But that's the classical mistake, isn't it? It's the same mistake that the Oilers keep making over and over and over again. They've got all of their chips on Draisaitl and McDavid, and they forget the rest of the hockey, as in. Got to defend and stop the goals from going in.
Well, and the thing with the Oilers is that it's not like they're cheap in net. Like, they've got some money tied up for goaltending, but they're not getting any puck stop. They've improved a little bit lately, but both Leafs and Oilers, I was expecting to do something in net today, even in a minor way. But nothing there, certainly. Giordano, I guess, is a nice add for the Leafs.
Yeah, it's veteran experience. He's going to play with Brody as well, like he did in Calgary. So, that's a good move, but there's still something missing, and it's quite key. I mean, I know some people say you don't need good goaltending to win the Stanley Cup, but I don't buy that. I mean, the games are so tight in the playoffs that if you don't have a clutch guy back there making the stop, you won't win. So,
yeah, when you think about what teams like Tampa Bay did again, another deadline of stacking up, and what Florida did. What a deadline for the Panthers.
I think this whole LTI air use is, I'm going to call that the Florida trick now, because they're really good. Both teams are doing that with Ekblad injured. Now they can do it as well. I'm just
it's true,
Florida. What is it with them? But you know what? If anyone wins but Tampa, I'm happy this year. Enough. Tampa Bay, please. Oh, but come on.
Yeah, the Panthers, I think, they went into the deadline. They're already a strong team. They're so strong up front.
Yeah.
They have forwards that, are pretty close to those forwards in Toronto and Edmonton. And still they went into that deadline knowing that they needed to stock up if they were going to do anything in a division with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, Bill Zito must have thanked his lucky star as well, because Claude Giroux told the Flyers, I'm going to Florida. That's the only team I want to go to. How happy are you when you hear that? It's like, nice. You're not going to have to break the bank, because the guy wants to come and play for you. So, yeah.
That was
Right.
a pretty nice help for sure.
Yeah.
having the player pick your team is a pretty nice help. But then he also did the work for Sherratt and got in
Yes.
on that early. And they're set up nicely, I think, for they've done what they could do in terms of being ready to confront Tampa Bay in the playoffs. And
Yeah, the management sure has done its thing. Now it's up
Yeah.
to the coach and the players. I mean, it's all in their hands. But yeah, I'm gonna follow Florida really closely. I think they'll be good this offseason.
they're going to be good. It makes one has to wonder if Toronto has done enough. And some other teams in the East, like I thought Boston did well with Ekholm. Nice.
Yeah, they did well, and Lindholm as well. I mean, but it's the Bruins, so I've
Sorry.
got trouble saying they're good. I don't like it.
with Lindholm. Sorry, I called him Ekholm. I do that all the time. I confuse those two. But
it is confusing.
to make the trade and then to re-sign him. They're in a sense they got a rental, but they've also what they've given up they made a purchase for years to come, so it was a nice deal. It'll be interesting to see what becomes of the East with those two total powerhouse teams in Florida, and then a bunch of other teams that you're left wondering, was it enough to really compete? And yet I don't know if I ever rule out the Bruins in a playoff series. So
True, but I think they wanted to do more in the sense that they've been showcasing Jake DeBrusk and they weren't able to trade him, so they signed him to an extension. I think to make him more appealing to other teams, going like fees under control now, but no dice. So I think Boston still wanted to do more, but just couldn't.
For sure, and that's an odd situation having DeBrusk sitting there playing well.
Yeah.
But sitting there with a trade request that at no point has he rescinded. Awkward situation for the Bruins.
Yes, very well. A little bit like the Habs with Petrie, really.
Right.
I mean, he must have been quite disappointed today, but I think pretty much everyone knew that contract wasn't going to get moved today. It's too big. It's a enough season kind of deal, isn't it?
It is, and the Habs have a few of those. They have a few of those off-season. Petrie. Maybe if they sweeten the pot, they can move Armia. Maybe like I think for me, I think Savard is the deal that's the contract that's hardest to move.
No, I don't think we're going to be able to move Savard. I don't think so. He's not exactly a modern day defenseman, is he?
No,
he's very much the old school Bergevin approach.
For sure.
I don't think that's moving. I think maybe I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to move Gallagher though.
Do you think they'd try to move Gallagher?
I think they will try. I think when St. Louis says he wants to help Gallagher become more of a complete player and blah, 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 I think that's part of, when Kent Hughes got the job, he said, I don't sell low. I want to help my players develop, blah, blah, blah. I think they're trying to build up Gallagher to be able to trade him. That's what I'm thinking. Not that I'm happy about that because I love the player, but I think that's a lot of money.
I don't know if there are many Habs fans that don't love Gallagher, but it's the, it's the whole, how much he was underpaid for the first few years, and now he's got the big contract, but his body was spent in the first contract, right? So it's
and also you took away his two line mates, and he's struggling without them. He really is, and you can't put him on Suzuki's line because clearly Suzuki and Caulfield have great chemistry, so you don't touch that. And if you've got a legitimate top six, Gallagher probably isn't in it, and then you end up paying $6.5 million a year for a third line player, and it's just like,
that's a lot for sure. We spoke already about Edmonton and missing the goalie market, but they added Kulak and they added was it Brassard at the end of the day that they managed? Was that?
Oh yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. So they have, and of course they managed Kane earlier. So they've done some. They've made some adjustments certainly, but who do you see as being the dangerous teams out west?
I like Minnesota.
Okay.
I like Minnesota. I like what Bill Guerin's done out there. I'm just not sure that, they're the ones who got Fleury in the end, which was probably the big goalie target. But I'm not entirely sure that, Fleury is such a money goalie. Yes, he's won in the past, but he had great teams in front of him. Right. I can't forget, his brain fart against Canadians in last season's playoff. Right. I mean, that just gave the Canadians the series. I think he's nervous sometimes and the games gets a bit away from him, but it remains not great on the goaltending they had anyway. So, and I like the fact that they went out to get Delorier as well, because, that's not a top six player, but it's a good, team guy, a lot of grit. I think that's a good move. So, I like the Wild.
He's really made a niche for himself, when in his time in Anaheim, certainly carved out a role for himself that, getting a third for that player was not a bad return.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the Avalanche is going to do well as well.
I think that's probably the team to beat.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly they've been dangerous in a couple of areas. Big additions. Didn't really need, like, if you look at that lineup, didn't strike you as a lineup that needed a whole lot, but certainly they went into this, the addition they made in Lehkonen demonstrates for me a team that it's a total Tampa Bay move. We know we're close, and now
we're committed to winning now.
Yes, we know we're putting the finishing touches on what's a pretty good thing already.
Yeah.
Thoughts about the Calgary Flames?
What did they do today? I mean, they got the Foley early on, but today, what did the Flames do?
So they were clever to get to Foley early. They then they added Yarncroke, is it his name is? He's going to play in a 3C role for them, it looks like. And then they added Carpenter at the end for a 4C role. So like they've added some skill there today. I think they're or in the trade deadline period, I guess. I think they're a team that, for me, they're a team that's the sleeper a little bit.
I can see them as being the dark horse. Yeah. I know that they wanted to try and move Monahan, but God, has he fallen down? Oof.
I know.
It's amazing to see how badly he's doing.
I had some fantasies early in the Hughes era that maybe it would be they could pull off a Gallagher for Monahan sort of deal. Two players that need a switch up. Monahan deal is briefer. It ends sooner, but he's not. His play is not matching his pay, and that's definitely the challenge. Not. Yeah.
But I'm not sure you can move Gallagher if all you're getting is kind of a problem in return, because Gallagher is still part of the heartbeat of the Habs.
For sure.
So if you rip him out, you need to get something in return that's going to be useful, and not just, a bad contract that's a lot shorter, isn't it? Is it just 1 year left on Monahan?
I think Monahan has 2 beyond this year, which is still, it would still be, an enormous reprieve for the Habs, because it would take them, that's 2 years from now is probably when they'd start, re-spending, right? Yeah. So having that freed up would be fine, but it's kind of one of those things. It's a long shot. In terms of the cap space. Kent Hughes said today that he was close to moving the Shea Weber deal.
Yeah.
We know that Petrie is likely. They're going to likely make us a go at moving that in the at the draft.
Probably,
where do you see the options for? Where are some teams where the Habs might find some reprieve? Where are some good trade partners?
Well, to be honest, I thought that Weber was heading out to Arizona, but when they got Brian Little, I was like,
yeah.
From then on, I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with the LTIR relief and how it can be used. But I heard someone today saying that perhaps Minnesota could be interested to that in the offseason. I'm not sure how. But, we'll see. To be honest, I was hoping that Weber would be moved, but I didn't really look into the potential candidates. I was just like, fingers crossed, let's hope he moves. But what I'm glad about though is I don't think Bergevin would ever have entertained that, because he was a good general manager, but he got so emotional, really attached to his players. I think that's why he wouldn't have entertained trading Weber. He wouldn't have, he didn't hesitate to give Gallagher such a big contract either. I mean, he was crying when he was talking about the contract. That tells you how emotionally attached he was to those players. I think that in Hughes, we're not getting that. We're getting a business mind type of guy. And I like that. So, yeah.
It's interesting, right? Because, this is the guy still, though, that, moved Andrew Hammond so that he could continue to play in the NHL, right? Like he's talked a lot about wanting wanting Montreal to be a place where players want to play. And, the Jekyll Hyde thing with Marc Bergevin was that he could be so emotional and so attached to some guys. Like he talked about Shea Weber and Brendan Gallagher like they were his children.
But not Markov and Radulov. Good point.
Right on.
That's where you are going, right?
The summer of Markov and Radulov, it was,
you want loyalty, buy a dog.
Right on. There's that quote, right? And so, there was, and how many, I'm not confident that the way that Phil Deneau left Montreal, I'm not confident that there wasn't hard feelings there either.
But they're now living happily ever after, both in LA.
Well, yes, maybe. It's a little bit funny to me that Habs fans think that everybody leaving the Habs, every trade candidate is going to LA. I'm not sure that Bergevin has quite that much influence there, but certainly, there is a bit more of a business approach. We'll be respectful and we'll be straight up with you, but we're going to do what we need to do as a team.
There's a lot of transparency. That's
for sure.
Very, very nice. It's a nice change. And I think that since Chantal Machabée was appointed, it's been a world of difference. And that's so good for that organization. I mean, loving it.
For sure. So, have the trade deadline's over now. Who are the two? Let's pick four teams. Two teams from the East, two teams from the West that are the teams that come out of this trade deadline are going to the playoffs with the best opportunities to take it all.
I'm gonna go with Florida in the East, and I have to say Tampa Bay, even though I don't like it. But yeah, I don't think you can dismiss them. You just can't. I mean, they're perennial contenders, and it's just going to keep on going. So yeah,
for sure.
And in the West, I'm going to go back with my my pick from earlier, Minnesota. I quite like, and the Avalanche. Yeah, that would be my four.
The Minnesota in the West and Colorado. Colorado's my certainly the team that I see having the strongest chance in the West, but I've got a soft spot in my heart for the Calgary Flames, and they're the team that I'm wondering if they're going to be last season's Habs a bit. That no one's really paying too much attention to them, but they're built for the playoffs.
That could be the case. But the Flames, I mean, last year they were, they didn't make the playoffs, but how much of that was because of COVID and their compressed calendar and all that? They were much better than they showed last season. And now with getting to Foley as well, I mean, they are a serious threat, but it's a bit of a sleeper pick. I think they're not up there with the favorites, but they could be this season's Habs. I mean, it's quite rare that it's, who's supposed to get to the cup final gets there from both sides. So, yeah.
For sure. In the East, I'm with you on Florida and Tampa. I wanted to replace one of those teams with the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm not sure they've done enough at the deadline to really...
I was actually shocked that they went for Domi.
Yes.
I was surprised. I was like, really? Does that mean that something else fell through? Or, that kind of feels like a backup plan, but we'll see.
That's what it felt like to me, is a bit of a backup plan. And I was expecting them to pull off a deal more like the Avalanche did with Lehkonen. And adding that sort of consummate piece that role player that just fills a lot of holes. And I don't think that's Domi. You know,
no, it's not. He's unidimensional. He's there to,
Yes.
you know, put up points, and he's not doing it with much regularity since, you know, joining Columbus, although the last year with Montreal was also bad. But I don't know how much of that was due to deployment, to be honest. But
yeah,
you know, it's a long story.
Yeah, that's another story for sure. But it felt like Domi fell out of favor and fell out fast in Montreal.
Yeah.
Whatever happened there. And he's had moments in Columbus, but not consistency, as you said. So it'll be interesting to see where he gets deployed in Carolina and what that looks like.
But, you know, you never know. Carolina's giving, what, $4.28 million a year to Kotkaniemi for 8 years, and he's not got 40 points yet in his career on the season. So, you know, and he's been playing on the fourth line, and they still commit to 8 years. That's like, what? Okay.
That's an interesting dynamic, actually. And the only thing I can think about with Kotkaniemi, that contract was announced today. We knew it was coming, but that, you know, the formal extension came today, 8 years, 4.82. You know, that's a lot of cash. But at the end of the day, you know, in 5 years from now, might look like a steal. My thinking about that is that they must be their intention must be to let Trocheck walk in the off season, so maybe they see him as an own rental, and you know, and to elevate, you know, to promote Kotkaniemi at that time. I actually see Trocheck as a potential fit in Montreal for the short term. That's another thought, but
interesting, yeah.
just you know, for the short term while you're waiting for Shane Wright to grow up.
Let's not count our chickens yet. You know, even if the Canadians do get the first pick, I'm not sure that they would go for Shane Wright. I don't think he's quite the consensus yet. But see.
That's an interesting. Now that's a little interesting cliffhanger. What makes you say that? Who do you think they might be into?
I don't know, but I don't see him. You know, he's not a generational talent.
No.
So I'm not sure they would go for him. I think they'll think long and hard before going for him. And I think this organization, this management, might surprise us and throw us a few curveballs. So yeah, I'm not taking anything for granted.
It's an interesting idea. They will go into this draft with like a gazillion picks. And one wonders if they will try to get creative with them. If there will be some, will they pick? Or will they try to use that pick to get a more established player? Who knows?
I don't know. I think they will pick, though, because the draft is in Montreal, and, you know, I think they'll pick, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to that for sure.
For sure. You're going to the draft?
I'm hoping to be going. Yeah, I should be able to get the credentials with Hockey Buzz. So fingers crossed with that. That'll be fun. I was on the press gallery last season for the Cup final. That was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm hoping to get the draft as well.
Well, maybe we'll get it. Maybe I'll get to see you there at the draft, July 7th and 8th. But between now and then, we have you know, our Habs will be there, but certainly a lot of Canadian teams do expect to be participating, and we have, you know, still 20 games in the regular season roundabout, and then playoffs, and then lots to come from there.
But you know what's good? Those 20 games back under Ducharme would have felt like 82 games. Now 20 with St. Louis, like, 20 more fun games. Woo!
It's 20 fun games to watch for the Habs. And the, you know, the interesting thing is the playoff teams in the East now are sort of in, you know, the East in particular is set.
Yeah,
you know,
it has been for quite some time.
And it has been for ages. So in a sense, it's the playoff teams that are suffering through the end of season. The West is still a lot more dicey. I was surprised not to see a little bit of action from a couple of teams. The Preds in particular, I was surprised didn't do something. But they probably know that they're, you know, in a transition space and it's not the best year to spend. But
you know what I'm hoping in the West? I would like the Golden Knights to miss the playoffs. I'm sorry.
Well, it's a possibility right now.
I don't like I think I just don't like the way they came into the league. Like the expansion draft, the rules were, it's like every GM was taken by surprise, because expansion drafts used to be, much tougher for the new team, whereas the Golden Knights kind of felt like, here, have all the good players right there. And then they went straight to the cup final. That's not how you win a cup. That's not fair. So, yeah, well, I'll be happy if they don't make it.
The thing I find a little bit irritating about them is, and you'll appreciate this from the Bergevin era, but the criticism I've always had of Marc Bergevin in Montreal was he was pretty good at individual deals, but I couldn't see how it was all supposed to fit together in a vision for the team. Like they were all these random deals, and it was never clear to me what he was going for as a team. And I feel that's a little bit true with Vegas in the sense that, what in the expansion draft, they did what was smart. They used rules that were there for them, and they managed that draft brilliantly and came out with a good team. But since then, they've been content to constantly go after if there's any name on the market, of course, Vegas is interested. And it's like, are you just interested in whoever's next? Or is there a bigger vision that you're fitting towards? And they've never had to figure out a vision because they had such instant success.
But they're going to pay for it down the line because they've traded so many picks. It's unreal. I mean, you'll remember this, and maybe someday I'll get to remind you, but I wonder if the reach for Jack Eichel was the step too far. I wonder how that's all going to shake out, but it's certainly they're in a tight spot there right now. The West is still completely undecided, but it's teams that weren't expected to be there are lurking, and teams who were pretty sure they were going to be there not so much. So the rest of the season for the West has a little bit more intrigue than the East, certainly. And then we move into playoff time, and it's a fun time to be a fan. It's a fun time to be a seller if you're a Habs fan, but nothing's funner than being a buyer and getting ready for the playoffs. And so that's true. So it's a good time to be a hockey fan in general. Thank you, Corinne, for joining me and for helping us wrap up this trade deadline. Lots to look forward to, lots to continue to talk about. We'll do it again sometime. But for now, to all you listeners who've been paying attention to our chatter during the trade deadline day, thanks very much for listening. I'm Lori Bennett for Wreckhouse Press, and join me again another time. Have a good one.